Okay, so today we're going to finish up this discussion we started on milligrams versus potency by giving you some concrete examples of when you're going to find this in health food stores and what does it mean to the overall benefit of the product. Now, in the previous video, we talked about the fact that milligrams do not measure potency. They measure weight. And so you want to know right away that when you compare 50 milligrams of one thing to 50 milligrams of another, may not be the same, even if they both say vitamin C, for example. It can be very confusing. Now, before we get started with this, I want to say I'm going to be pretty brief today. And this is a topic that you could spend 45 minutes, 60 minutes or more on. And I'm going to try to shrink it down into a 4 or 5 minute video. So bear with me. If you want more information, give us a call at Vital Choice. Come on in or check out our podcast, our audio podcast. The website address is below you right now. We've talked about this before. Now, let's get right into it. When we talk about nutrients, when you look at food, and I think most people would agree, food is the best place to get your vitamins and minerals. Why? Well, that's because that's the way the body was designed to see its nutrition. It's the best way for us to process those ingredients. Now, when you get a standard, what's called a USP or an isolate vitamin, let's pick on Centrum, for example, they're using, and sometimes they're not even using natural sources, but let's say they're using a natural source of what's called an isolated vitamin. This is not the same as what you're going to find in nature. In fact, it's an isolate. It's an isolated part of the whole vitamin that's found in nature. What do I mean? Let's look at vitamin C. If you pick up your bottle, it's undoubtedly the case that if you look at it, it's going to say vitamin C, and then somewhere in parentheses or down below in ingredients, it's going to say ascorbic acid or calcium ascorbate or something like this. Now, what is that? Ascorbic acid is a single molecule. It is not a complex nutrient. It is a single molecule. It is a representation of the more complex vitamin. Now, the government allows companies to say vitamin C as ascorbic acid. It allows ascorbic acid to essentially represent vitamin C in that nutrient. But it is not the same. If you talk to a biochemist and they got a slide and looked on a microscope between ascorbic acid and vitamin C from, let's say, a pepper or an orange, they're going to look dramatically different. Now, again, I love to use pictures. Picture a pie. Ascorbic acid is the shell. It's a very important part of the pie. I always say if you would have talked to my grandmother, she would have told you it's the most important part of the pie. And it may be true with ascorbic acid, but it's still just a part of the whole. Okay? Whereas when you get that ascorbic acid in nature, it's never isolated as a pie shell. It's always in the form of the whole pie. You get much, much more. It's much more complex. And that means the body utilizes it, uses it at a much greater rate. You can take a much lower dose of a whole food nutrient and actually get more benefit than a much higher dose. Again, it's like if somebody slices you a piece of pie and puts it on your plate, and then slices the exact same size of just the shell and puts it on a plate. Which one are you going to be happier with? Which one are you going to want to eat more? Which one are you going to get more benefit out of? Clearly, you're going to get more satisfaction out of that piece of pie than just a piece of the shell. So, and that's very really what happens with ascorbic acid. When you pick up your bottle, you'll see, I'll say ascorbic acid, vitamin C has ascorbic acid, 500 milligrams. And then you'll pick up a bottle of whole food vitamins. Now, who makes these things? Well, there are a lot of companies out there doing it now. My favorites, of course, Vital Choice. We have a couple whole food multivitamins now, but the two biggies and the companies that I'm the biggest fans of are New Chapter and Megafood. Both are great whole food vitamin companies. So we're not going to get into the process of how they create them today, but the nutrients that you're getting in those are as close as the way they are in food as possible, okay? So when you pick up a bottle of New Chapter vitamin C, they're behind me here, when you pick up a bottle of New Chapter vitamin C, it doesn't say vitamin C as ascorbic acid. It says vitamin C, 60 milligrams. Now, it's important to know that this is where we finally get to talk about milligrams versus potency. Because when you're looking at a whole food nutrient, that complex form that has everything that vitamin C in nature has, the pie shell, the filling, everything, you can take a lower milligram weight and actually get better results. And we look at this in food. You could never eat enough green peppers and oranges and great sources of what we know are vitamin C sources. You could never eat enough to get 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C. That's why we take 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid, because it's an isolated molecule that we don't utilize as well, and that leads us to having to take much, much more to get the benefit. So I hope that kind of clears it up today. Basically, again, to kind of summarize, there are a couple different forms of vitamins out there. There are isolates and there are whole foods. And you get dramatically better results with a whole food form than an isolate form. So again, to wrap it up, we're talking about milligrams and potency. If you're comparing the same raw material, ascorbic acid to ascorbic acid, then yes, 500 milligrams is going to be less potent than 1,000 milligrams. But if you're comparing a whole food vitamin C, say from New Chapter, Mega Food, or Vital Choice, and it says 60 milligrams of vitamin C, it's difficult to compare it to 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid. I would take the whole food over the isolate every time. So again, that was a really condensed version. I hope it made sense. If it didn't, send us a comment. Post a comment. We'll try to respond to it. Again, check out our podcast site. That has a longer discussion. Or best case scenario, if you're in the Cleveland, Ohio area, stop on in and let's talk about it.